Bit of a breakthrough tonight. I've been trying to wrap my head around doing a reverse snare sound for rock and roll radio. So it's been a bit of just an understanding around the reverb and whatnot. So I think I jumped the gun by getting into something like a gated reverb on the snare, and then trying that out. It sounded wrong is the best way I can explain it. A lot of this time has been playing around with the different preset functions that are on Logic. Of course, not being experienced in this part of it, I sort of start with that. I know a lot of the experts probably don't. They know where they're going, but I have to start somewhere. So I'm just going with a lot of the presets and playing around with the Space Designer in Logic Pro for the snare. Quickly realised it wasn't working out, so I went back to trying reverb on the entire drum kit. Did that as well, and it was sounding okay. The downside was I was getting a lot of a woomph woomph sort of sound through the reverb that I liked. It was sort of muddying up the rest of the sound of the song, even if I had it on subtly. But then if you get too subtle, you just lose the impact of the space you get when you're putting in reverb in the entire kit. So I went back and meanwhile I was trying to think, well, I really should be listening to a reference track. Now this is a mistake I've made with this song, right? So all the experts say, all the tutorials say is you really need a reference track to not try and emulate 100%, but as sort of like a North Star, direction for the sound that you want to get to. It's never really going to be the same anyway, unless you're really trying to get that sound itself. But kind of what's the point? Like there is a gated reverb sound preset in Logic where I could make it basically sound, the drums sound like Phil Collins in the Air Tonight. But what's the point of that? That's been done. That suits that song. It wouldn't really suit this one as well. Been a bigger rock and roll, a faster, more aggressive rock and roll song compared to something like In the Air Tonight. Lost my train of thought, but it was basically, I needed a reference track. That's what I was getting at. So in Icebreaker, what did I use for the reference track? I think I used COD by AC/DC because it had a similar sort of tempo, similar sort of feel. Both Red and I liked the drum sounds on that, so that was what I went with for that. And then for rock and roll radio, I just didn't do that. Not I'd say kind of on purpose. I didn't really think about it too much. I did think, should I get a reference track? I went, I'll just get into it. I sort of know the sound that I want, but it's not necessarily the production of the sound to have something to refer to, but it's more the actual, I guess not the song structure and whatnot like that, but it is probably more production. It's probably the right thing to say, is the engineering side, the mixing side of it, the overall, the vibe of the track for a reference. So it finally hit me last night, Def Leppard's Photograph. So they've got that exact same snare sound that I'm after. Probably not, again, I just contradicted myself. I don't want to be exactly like that, but it's much more of a North Star to me than something like The Stroke. The Stroke by Billy Squier is what we started with, Red suggested, which is a good one because it's a great song and great sound. But I felt that snare on that, the reverse sounds far too metallic. Suits that song, not good for us. And then of course, it was the facepalm moment is Def Leppard's Photograph. It's got a reverse snare on that as well, and that sounds great at the start of that, and it kicks into the drums from there. And it's even got the similar sort of approach I want, because I don't want to go too overboard with the reverb and have this like a stadium sounding song, which is, I might change my mind on that because that's kind of what this song has. It's got some woes and yeahs in there and whatnot like that. It's kind of anthemic in a way, but I don't want to go fully down that 80s glam metal or glam rock stadium sounding song like a Def Leppard song, but I want to get close, so take parts of that for it. So Photograph's perfect because it's like a lot of Def Leppard stuff. It does have a mixture of that stadium sounding rock, but off that album, I think what's that one? Photographs on, is it Pyromania? I've forgotten the name of it, but anyway, it's that album's quite stripped back, and even though it's got that anthemic sound to it, it's the Robert Martin Lange who does some of the AC/DC albums. Again, I love his production, and it is much more of a stripped back version, even though they've got those hints of the stadium rock in there. So anyway, I've had to go through some tutorials and watch some things. I finally found another one of a YouTube channel to shout out is Spinlight Studios. So this dude, I think his name's Reese, an Aussie bloke, and he shares some really great mixing tutorials. Thankfully, again, he's using Logic Pro, so that's the same software I'm using. And he's got one there on about doing a reverse snare sound. Now, I had to, what I did was, because the original recording we've got on the snare is quite noisy, we've got a lot of background noise in there, and that's kind of intentional. I didn't put in noise gate on the recording. And by that, of course, I mean I've got a lot of bleed from other instruments, so you can hear the kick, you can hear the hi-hat and the cymbals and whatnot like that. They're muted compared to what you'd get with the overheads or something, but it's still there, and that can really stuff up when you're coming to do effects, because it takes all that into account when you're applying effects, and it can just make it sound really washy. So what I did was I used the trigger and actually used the sample from Spinlight Studios. I purchased one of his packs, which is basically samples, of course, are just the one shot of a recording they've done, and they've mixed the recording of a snare hit, like a boom, boom, and I've got a good one from that. So I basically used the transients, so the hits from Red's snare track, and put that into MIDI, which is this function, this drum doubler function that you've got in Logic. And then I inserted this what you call it, the sample, and then I couldn't really figure out how I could reverse it, because MIDI's kind of like a digital signal. You can't really revert. I don't know how to explain it completely, but it's essentially, it's a digital artifact that just sits there, and it has one thing that it does. It just plays the one thing. It isn't like you can do a reverse of a sound, like a whoosh. You have to code that in a way. So what I did this time was figured out, I went online, Googled it. You can bounce the region and place in Logic Pro, which turns it into a waveform, so the actual audio that I could use, and then I could reverse that. So I've done that. I've just chopped it up a bit, and I've got the sound much closer to where I was. I think before I was getting a lot of weird muddiness and just some strange robotic sounds and whatnot. Now this is sounding much more like it's bringing in that reverse snare sound. But I've got a bit more work to do now, because I've got this one sample. I've got to basically place that in the right spots throughout the song, and then I've got to probably do reverb in there somewhere. I need to figure out where that's going to sit. Is it going to be on the reverse, or is it going to be on the drums? That's going to be the next thing. But I've made progress, and I wanted to, I just had a eureka moment before, and thought I've got to pick up the phone and do it now, because I know in my recent post I said I want to do more of these, and I knew I'll forget if I just kept cracking on. So quick break. I'm going to jump back into it. Love it. I'm happy.